Hey, what's up guys, it's Ben Bonk, and today I'm going to be showing you guys the development process of my newest puzzle tile based game called Keydungeon. So before this project I was working a ton on my parkour game that I started working on, which is also my first 3D game, which you've probably seen I made a few tutorials on, and I really want to get something finished and done, so I decided to take a brief break from the game and work on a kind of puzzle based tile game. So the original mechanic of this game is kind of copied from another indie game developer who has a YouTube channel called Dimlark and his game Cross the Gap, and I thought that game was really cool and really innovative, and so I decided to kind of put my own twist on it and introduce some new mechanics. So without further ado, let's just get straight into this devlog. The first thing I decided to do for this game was make some art, so I hopped into Sprite and spent a few hours working on some player animations, a tile set. It's a really cool art that I used making a simple 4-color palette, or 4 colors color palette, which I think looks really nice, and I really like the aesthetic of the game, and I imported that into Unity, and within a few hours I had a simple looking scene looking like this, and I thought it was pretty cool. After setting up my tile map, getting my animations hooked up and all that kind of stuff, I followed a very helpful Games plus James tutorial. I modified a bit of the code to make it just right for my game, and Games plus James has really helped me out on this tutorial, so huge shout out to him. And sooner than later, well, I mean, not sooner than later, it took quite a few hours and days, this is all over a few days, but I did have a working player that can move around on tiles. After that, I created a tile falling script, which makes my tiles fall after my player steps off of them, and so I think it looks for a pretty cool effect. All I had to do was just change the rigid body's gravity scale to something like 1, and the tile would fall really smoothly and pretty coolly, and so that's what I did for that. Another core mechanic that my game needed was making myself to be able to collect keys and make sure that once you have enough keys you can enter the door. So I wrote a key and door script, which pretty much allowed my player to collect keys and make them destroy after collecting them, and then setting that amount and then checking if the amount was the amount of keys that you needed to get, and if it was so, you would be allowed to enter the door and progress to the next level. Throughout this whole game dev process, I also want to mention that I created some pretty cool animations, like when you collect a key, a 1 out of 3 or whatever text comes down, and I think that I like this because it doesn't clutter up all the UI. I didn't want to have a bunch of UI just being cluttering up the whole screen, and so I kind of just made this fast animation, which I think looks pretty cool. And I also spent some time making I only use the UI elements that are really really necessary, and I also tried to kind of spice up my game by using animations for a lot of the features. Some games I would normally just not even care, but I try to make this really polished, like for example the tutorial text that come up, play an animation, and also in my start screen, which I later on created, I used animations to really spice it up and make my game look a lot better. I then threw together a very scrappy just options menu, which literally only has one option to mute the audio, which isn't really that necessary. I just couldn't think of anything. I just kind of wanted an options menu, but it's not really necessary, but I still put it in there anyway. And I also ended up using 2D lighting, which I have to say is extremely helpful, as my original game looked kind of plain, but after I followed this really helpful Brackeys tutorial, which was a pretty much 2D lighting tutorial using the universal render pipeline, this totally made my game look a million times better. I mean, I cannot emphasize for Unity beginners, I would highly recommend using some kind of render pipeline, or it's not that hard, or it's really not that hard at all, and using Unity's post-processing systems. And it can make your games look so much better. Just adding a few effects can make your game look from beginner game to definitely an advanced game. So if I had to give one tip, I would highly recommend. You can see my game went from looking like this. I mean, it's still good, but a little dull. Just adding a bunch more light effects make my game a whole new just brightness and coolness. I also ended up adding a scene transition using Bracky's tutorial, which pretty much just, adds a cool scene transition when going between levels and scenes, which I also think looks super really cool. And again, this is just a nice feature of polish that I would definitely recommend for any beginners. After playtesting a little bit and creating some levels, I quickly realized that my game was really easy and frankly not that fun. And as I looked back into the Across the Gap game, I quickly realized that not only could you collect keys, but there's also 2 players, and that's what really made the game hard. And in that game, you pretty much have to get both players across the map, and you have to think about where you go strategically. And so instead of making a second player, I decided to create my own new mechanic, which would pretty much allow you to press the arrow keys to open up a tile placing menu. And when you press space, you can place a tile. And I'm very proud of this feature. I also made it so you can have a limited amount of tiles that you can place. And this feature, I use some things that I'm usually not too familiar with, like physics 2D.overlap circle, and I actually managed to get some of those kind of advanced Unity mechanics, I guess you could call them, to create a very cool tile placing system in my opinion, and I'm very proud how it worked out and created for some pretty cool level design. To make my game more interesting, I made it so some levels you don't actually have to collect every single key to open the door. You only need to collect maybe a few keys, and so this makes it so the player has to strategically think about where they want to go and place their tiles in a strategic way and make sure they get enough keys and be able to get back to the door with the least amount of tiles placed as possible. So this made for some pretty fun levels also. Now from this point I made some more levels, and I started to notice again my game was getting a little dull. So I introduced the new mechanic of that instead of just placing these kind of weak tiles that after you step off them they fall, I created the mechanic where you can pretty much, instead of pressing space, you can press Alt, and this will place a sturdy tile, and sturdy tiles do not fall when you exit off of them. So I made it I was trying to make some interesting levels where you'd have to pretty much go and venture across a place, but you need to make sure you use your sturdy tiles effectively and using the most effective way you can so you don't run out of tiles and you can collect all the keys, which made for some really interesting levels also. Over the next few weeks I would end up making about 15 levels in my game, with some of them being really easy, trying to make them get harder over time. This was definitely the hardest part of my game development experience, as I think I like to say it's pretty easy to make easy levels, but not that easy to make hard levels, and so it's required a ton of playtesting. And while this all seems like I just made this in a few hours, no, I spent weeks making these levels, and while they're not the best, I'm not the best level designer, I think I did a pretty good job, and just making these levels and trying to make them as hard as possible. I then ended up making some logos for my game, took screenshots, and uploading on itch.io, which is a really cool game hosting website, and yeah, that's where my game stands right now. I'm really proud of this game, and I think it taught me a lot about level design and many different concepts of programming that I didn't know before, and I think I made it also a really well polished experience, which I'm really happy about. And so if you did like this video, please, if you want to give me a like, that would be really much appreciated. I'm thinking of posting a tutorial series on how to make a game similar to mine right here on YouTube. If you would like that, just let me know. And yeah, I'm also make sure to check out the game on itch.io. That'd be really cool if anyone could test it out for me and give it a go. And yeah, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.